But Love You to Death is such an improvement in all areas that... Good God, man, breathe! Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Spinner Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about the new album from Tegan and Sara called Love You to Death. So here's, let's say, a different version of my intro for my recent Weezer review. While there is always a lot of talk around when a band or artist makes a drastic change for an album, one thing that always interests me is how they choose to follow that up. Of course, you got a few different outcomes that can come from that. Sometimes you might go back to the usual sound. Maybe it was just meant to be a one-time experiment or passion project to get something out of your system and flex some creative muscles. You get that with a lot of side projects, for example. Or maybe the inevitable backlash from fans or even the charts makes you turn and retreat toward the safer, more agreeable sound from before. But sometimes that change in direction isn't a fluke, but the start of a whole new era where the fan base can either be open-minded and stay on board whether or not they agree with every little decision, or be doomed to spend the rest of their days typing a string of angry comments on their Facebook page every 2 or 3 years that they somehow think will cause any change whatsoever. Such is the case for this new album by the Canadian duo Tegan and Sara Quinn. Now, for the most part in the 2000s, they built this unique brand of indie rock with a lot of downstroked acoustic guitars, some pretty analog synths in the background, and in a genre and scene that can get too far up its own butt when it experiments, their core songwriting kept it refreshingly straightforward and to the point. Even if they're most ambitious on an album like my personal favorite, The Con, where the instrumentation got more diverse and fleshed out, their melodies have a way of really sticking in the brain either way, with simple but effective harmonies that I'm sure come natural, them being twin sisters and all. Anyway, their last album, Heartthrob, marked a major change in pace toward pop music. And no, not some cool brand of indie-tronic synth-pop, but straight up, current day, literally opening for Katy Perry pop music. Not only that, but their lyrical style, which already had a minor issue with repetition in both the breakup themes and some literal lines, just turned bland and unimaginative this time around. It was easily the worst aspect of what I actually thought was a pretty well-produced pop record, all things considered, albeit a slight guilty pleasure. So I was eager to see how their follow-up would compare to that, and luckily with Love You to Death, I think Tegan and Sara went the best path they could have possibly gone, taking the overall sound of Heartthrob in a more smart, assured, and frankly authentic direction. I can guarantee that if this was the album that kicked off this new pop phase of their career, they would have gotten a lot less backlash. I'll admit, the production from Greg Kurstin isn't really that different than it was on Heartthrob. Most of the guitars or real drums have been stripped away in favor of these smooth, glossy synths, dancey drum beats, and yeah, a lot of overly processed vocals. But there are some subtle key differences here, like moving away from the more EDM banger-style beats from before, and in favor of giving the percussion more of a potent groove on the more upbeat tracks, like Stop Desire and U-Turn, or other little things here and there, just to give this brand of synth-pop more of an 80s flair than anything else, which they really pull off in a similar way to, say, a Church's record, for example. Like, I love that extra bubbly synth tone in U-Turn, and Be With You, that combo of the pulsing synth bass and the almost xylophone-like sound of the keys there. I just loved that. And on the other hand, the first couple tracks are probably the most current sounding here, but I don't hear much in the way of trend hopping like I did in spots of the last album. Just tight synth chords, punchy drum machines, and some sharply written melodies on top of them. The song That Girl was an interesting but really cool way to open the record, with the chorus going into this whirlwind flurry of synth loops, really complementing the tone of the lyrics and already showing more unique mood and atmosphere than almost anything off Heartthrob. And yes, I like Heartthrob, but Love You to Death is just such an improvement on all fronts that the comparisons have to be made here. This album also bucks a lot of the formulas that were set on the last one. Like if a song only needs 2 repetitions of the chorus and doesn't need to be pushed past the 3-minute mark, well, that's what they're gonna do. Outside my least favorite here, Dying to Know, the redundancy in the chorus repetitions is kept to a minimum. This is a lean 31-minute pop record that gets in and gets out at exactly the right times. My only real gripes here are in some of the slower moments toward the middle, like White Knuckles not doing much outside the usual pop ballad template, and the stuttering vocal fragments in 100 times that really pull you out of an otherwise great stripped-back piano ballad. But yeah, other than that, musically, Love You to Death is a big improvement that sets the stage for the biggest improvement, the lyrics. See, my main issue with Heartthrob was just how boringly basic a lot of the lyrics were, kind of a checklist of love and breakup song tropes that even went as far as repeating whole verses outside a couple words. Love You to Death, on the other hand, doesn't let its poppier sound dumb down the content. I'd compare it more than anything to So Jealous, in that a lot of it's the narrator essentially calling out their own crap in the face of a rocky relationship. And sure, a lot of these songs are told in relationship terms, but they're really a framing device for some seriously smart self-analysis, alliteration. You see that right away with That Girl, where she's realizing that, hey, maybe I'm doing more harm than good getting all antagonistic when I don't need to be. This continues on Stop Desire, where these two are playing these dumb emotional games with each other, and it's this real sobering moment of, oh yeah, when we cut out the BS, we're actually doing alright. Who knew? And they approach it in a couple different ways throughout this thing, like with the heartbreaking 100 times looking back on these mistakes in hindsight, and meanwhile U-Turn is downright tongue-in-cheek in how flirtatiously self-deprecating it is, with that whole write you the love song you've earned line, as well as being helped by being one of the catchiest songs of 2016 so far. And here's where I think Love You to Death tackles this better than even So Jealous. It talks about the reflection, but it doesn't dwell on it. Like, to me, after a while, So Jealous just kept saying the same themes over and over again that it just kind of felt like a pity party after a while. But Love You to Death is more balanced than that, with some tracks showing where the real cracks in this relationship came from. So before anything else, I gotta get into a touchy area because it has to be mentioned. While yes, both Tegan and Sara are lesbians, one thing I've always appreciated is how they've never really used their sexuality as a gimmick. See, even from straight artists, you see a lot of them, especially over the past decade or so, using these quirky girl-on-girl premises and screaming them from the rooftops as a crutch for what's otherwise a really lazy and shallow song. And regardless of your social politics, we can all agree that's just kinda corny, right? I bring all this up because two songs here directly bring up the homosexual aspect and just treat it as another dynamic in their relationship that's actually very easy to buy. And the key thing, outside the literal naming of the genders, the core of these songs are still pretty universal and easy to relate to. Be With You is about not feeling the need to get married to prove your love, and Boyfriend's about feeling frustrated in your partner for dwelling on the person they were with before. Again, not an unrelatable or alienating theme in the slightest, and you can still buy how sincere and honest both these songs are. Now, like with the production, not every track excels like this. Like Faint of Heart doesn't do much with the forbidden love trope outside a possible gay thing that's never explicitly said. White Knuckles is kind of clumsily written in some spots, and Dying to Know is the one spot that keeps the whininess of some of the more insufferable parts of Heartthrob. But overall, I was very impressed with Love You to Death. Again, it takes their new direction and focuses and fine-tunes it in all the right ways to make it just as thematically engaging and musically infectious as almost anything they put out to date, so I think I'm going to give it an 8. While it's not flawless, you guys know me, I'm a sucker for a smartly written pop record, and this is just that. So if you guys have heard this album, what do you think about it? Do you agree with what I had to say? Do you disagree? Have any feedback about the channel in general? Do you like that I'm finally doing full-on reviews again? Let me know in the comments down below. Share this around with anyone who might be interested. Follow me on Twitter for updates and other great stuff. And hopefully I'll see you on the next episode. We're keeping it.